Hindus don't really believe that the image itself is God. And I think part of this is being defensive against Western and Christian criticisms. We've got the Ten Commandments. One of them says, you shall not make any graven images. Islam, again, it's a real prohibition on the worship of images. I think Muslims sometimes won't even paint a picture of a human being, because I think that's a wickedness as well. And Christianity, Judaism, they're all quite strong prohibitions on worship of images. And even from secular Western sources, people sometimes regard it as some sort of primitive type of religion, and they'll say, how can you believe that image is God? You made it yourself, and it's just something that you've made. So how can you then make something and then bow down before it? So if you talk to Hindus, they'll often say, well, that's because the ultimate God is Brahman. It's unknowable, inconceivable, beyond the senses, beyond the mind, and therefore, because we can't realise that God until the ultimate stage of our progression, we have to create for ourselves a symbol that we can worship, that we can perceive through the senses. So the Murti, be it Shiva, Vishnu, Krishna, Ram, it's just a symbol that we create and use because we're not yet able to commune with the true nature of God. But we don't believe it really is God. It's just help for us. Interesting, but I went to, I think it was in Jaipur, I went into a Jain temple, and Jains worship images of the Tirthankaras, and asking the priest there, and I was interested in this point about the similarity, and I asked him, I said there were people in there praying to the forms of the images of the Jain saints, the Tirthankaras, and I asked him, I said, when these people are praying there, is the Murti listening to their prayers? If they're praying for something, will he listen and bless them? And he said, actually, almost confidential about it, he said, they won't hear. He said, the Tirthankaras are no longer in this world. They've attained perfection and they've left this world behind, so they can't possibly hear the prayers. He said, but it's good for them to pray. It purifies their mind and it raises them spiritually. So he was saying basically the same thing, that these murtis, these images, they're not real embodiments of God. They're just things that we create to help us with our overall spiritual practice. Other Hindus, apart from Jains, other Hindus take a different view, and they will say that the Murti itself is an embodiment of God. And the traditional teaching on Murti Puja, coming back from the Shastras, the Agamas, etc., which teach about Murti Puja, do emphasise that this Murti actually is a form of God, so that when I go into the temple and I see the image of Vishnu, the Shiva Linga, the image of Krishna, that I am actually in the presence of God. The process of seeing, referred to as darshan, as Diana Eck makes clear in her book on the subject, is a two-way process. I see the Murti, but the Murti is also seeing me. And if you go into, I'm sure this experience of going into a Hindu temple, you'll often see people actually, that's one way, but having a conversation with them. I remember again going, I think it was a Krishna temple in Jaipur, and watching quite a long time a lady there, she was standing there, she was almost unburdening herself in front of the Murti of Krishna. It was quite clear that she perceived herself as being directly in the presence of Krishna, manifest in that Murti form as Govindaji. So what's going on? I mean, these people aren't stupid. They know that in many cases, the newly opened temples, the Murtis have been made. You can even go and see the craftsmen making the shilpins in about Mahabalipuram in South India. There's a lot of craftsmen there. They get trained. Actually, there's a college near Madras, near Mahabalipuram, where they train shilpins to construct Murtis, and they've got strict rules how it's done. But they do know that somebody's gone to a quarry, cut out a piece of rock and shaped it in the Murti, and then they're bowing down before it. So they're not stupid. Why are they doing this? It goes back to the ritual, and this is a huge subject and very interesting. I would argue, and I think it's uncontrovertible, that the process of Murti Puja, temple worship, resides entirely within the Tantric traditions. And I know that word it has all sorts of strange connotations as it's been used in the West, and it's not a word that Hindus like to use now because of the way it's been sort of misappropriated by Western sources. But the fact of the matter is that the Tantric traditions are those which espouse Murti Puja. And the Tantras, the Agamas, they reveal that the deity, him or herself, can be embodied and installed in a number of different forms. The Murti can take the form of a mantra, for example, and a lot of Tantric teachings is about mantras. The mantra isn't just a representative of the deity, the mantra is an embodiment of the deity. So, and that mantra, that deity, it can be installed within an image. So when a temple is opened, what actually happens is a long ritual process takes place, which is called prana pratishta, the installation of life in the temple. When the Murti is first made, it's not an embodiment of the deity, but then the ritual takes place whereby the priests install via mantra the presence of the deity within the Murti. So, and the final stage of the prana pratishta is usually the uncovering of the eyes. They're sometimes covered with mud, which is washed away. Sometimes I think with beeswax, which can be scraped away. I think that some of the rituals is with a golden pin they scrape away. And at the moment the eyes are opened, then the full presence of the deity is manifest in that form. So it's not evil, it's not particularly primitive, it's just a belief that the deity, him or herself, will manifest its own presence within that form as an act of mercy. We might be devotees of Vishnu, but what can we do? Where is Vishnu? He doesn't live in Oxford or Birmingham or anywhere. Vishnu is in some remote region. How can we worship Vishnu? Therefore, the priests on our behalf perform this ritual in which they invite Vishnu to mercifully become manifest in this a form that they have created, so that he can receive the worship. Now we might recall the story of Dayananda Saraswati and how he dismissed Murti Puja because rats were eating the offerings. But the point is, the Murti doesn't need the offerings. He just appears in that form so that we have a manifestation of God that we can worship. It's not that he's starving hungry and therefore we have to cook him, and if he doesn't, his tummy starts to rumble or anything like that. It's just a focus, a presence of God that we can see, perceive and engage in acts of worship towards. The other point I think I would make here, and this relates to wider Hindu ritual as well. There is a belief amongst Hindus and in Hinduism that certain types of thing are inherently sacred, and this can be objects, this can be places, this can be people, this can be rivers, this can be times, so that within the world that we inhabit there are intrusions of the sacred. And if I bring myself into contact with the sacred, then that has a purifying effect on me. We know about that. For another form of ritual is pilgrimage. The Kumbha Mela, for example. I think it did say something like 60 million people went to the Kumbha Mela. Amazing. And the Kumbha Mela festival, at the confluence of two sacred rivers, maybe three sacred rivers, the Saraswati, Jumna and Ganga, is a sacred place. It's not like Birmingham, it's not like Oxford, it's special. It's imbued with sanctity, and if I go to that place I will absorb the sanctity. Not only that, the Kumbha Mela takes place at a sacred time, so it's a sacred place, sacred water, sacred time, and by being there the sanctity of that time, place and water comes into my person and I am spiritually purified. And I would say that amongst the 60 million people, the strong belief was that if I go there and get into the river in time, which is a bit of an endeavour for 60 million people to get into the river, but all my sins, all the karma of my past sins will be washed away. And it's the same with the Murti Puja. The Murti isn't now rock, it is rock imbued with the sanctity of the presence of the deity, and therefore anything that touches the Murti, the substances that are offered, etc., similarly becomes sacred as well. And by me bringing myself into contact with those substances offered, the flowers, the water, the incense, etc., anything of that, they are sacred as well, and they will purify me. Just like I was talking earlier, excuse me,